I never thought marriage would take my son so far from me. Even now, as I sit by the window with the evening light falling gently across my lap, those words feel heavy on my tongue. They do not come from anger. They do not come from regret. They come from a quiet ache that has settled inside me, the kind of ache that grows slowly, silently, without anyone noticing. Not even the ones you love most. This is the story of how my son Saad drifted away from me without either of us realizing it was happening. When people say that a mother's heart is strong, they are right. But they forget to mention that even the strongest hearts can feel empty when their children change. Not suddenly, not loudly, but softly, like a door closing with a gentle click. Saad was always my pride, my happiness, my most loyal companion in the world. After his father passed when Saad was still young, I became both his mother and his father. I held his hand through school, through sickness, through every challenge he feared he could not overcome. He used to say, "Mom, I'll never leave you. Ever." I would smile and tell him not to make promises like that, but he insisted. "I mean it," he would repeat. "You are everything to me." Years later he met Sana. I remember the first time he brought her home. A gentle girl, soft-spoken, elegant. She greeted me with a smile shaped like respect and sweetness, and I welcomed her with the warmth a mother gives to anyone her daughter loves. I didn't know then that life was about to shift. I didn't know that with every new relationship, an old one changes form. Not because people stop loving each other, but because priorities find new homes. But the real story, the moment everything changed, that came much later. It was a Sunday afternoon. I had cooked Saad's favorite dish, chicken pulao, the one he always asked for on his birthdays. I still remember the aroma filling the house, reminding me of the days he would run into the kitchen and peek into the pot, unable to wait. Now I live alone. The house feels different. But that day I was excited. I packed the food carefully, covered it with a cloth just like in the old days, and went to visit him. I did not call. I should have called that. I know that now. But there are things mothers do out of love that others sometimes see as intrusion. I knocked on Saad's door smiling. Heard footsteps. The door opened. My son stood there, but the expression on his face was not the one I had seen for 28 years. He looked surprised. Almost uncomfortable. "Mom, been bat eye," he said softly. Before I could answer, Sana appeared behind him. She wasn't rude. She wasn't unkind. She only said one line, gently, carefully. "Auntie, it would be better if you message before coming. We're a little busy today." And that is when it happened. The moment that still echoes in my chest. Saad turned to me, his voice low, almost apologetic, yet distant in a way I had never heard before. "Mom, please don't come unannounced next time." The world did not break. The sky did not fall. Nothing dramatic happened. But something inside me quietly shifted. I felt a tiny thread loosen between us, a thread I had held for decades without ever imagining it would slip. I remember smiling even though my chest felt tight. I remember saying, "Of course, son. I understand." I remember lifting the bag of food slightly and offering it to him. "I made this for you. Just taste it later." He took it with a nod. Sana thanked me politely. And then I left. I walked slowly down the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the one before. I wasn't hurt by the words themselves. They were normal words, reasonable even. Everyone has their own life, their own space. But the tone, the distance, the unfamiliarity, that was what cut me. Because for the first time in my life, my son felt like someone else's man first, and my son second. And I didn't know how to hold that feeling. That evening I sat on my bed, holding the corner of my dupatta in my hand, twisting it the way I used to twist Saad's little school shirt buttons when he would crawl into my lap. I wasn't angry. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't blaming Sana. I was simply trying to understand. When did things change? When did Saad grow so far from me? When did my home stop being his home? I told myself it was normal. Children grow up. They marry. They build new lives. I knew this. I had seen this happen to others. I had even comforted other mothers when they felt this way. But knowing something and feeling something are two different things. I thought back to the days when Saad used to run to me with every little problem, every little joy, every little thought in his head. Now, after marriage, he shared those things with Sana. He should. She is his partner. She is his family. But where did that leave me? A mother's heart doesn't need to be the center of attention. It doesn't need devotion. It only needs presence. A little bit of time. A little bit of recognition. Not gifts. Not grand gestures. Just a warm conversation. A simple, "How are you, Mom?" But life is not always what we expect it to be. I still remember the silence of that night. The house felt bigger than ever. My phone stayed close to me, hoping Saad would call. Maybe he would say, "Mom, are you okay?" I didn't mean it like that. But the phone remained still. I placed my hand on my chest and whispered to myself, "It's all right. He's busy. He has a new life now." But deep inside, I wondered, was I slowly becoming a guest in my own son's world? That one moment, that one line, "Please don't come unannounced," became the beginning of a journey I never expected to walk. A journey where love remained strong, but closeness slowly faded. A journey where my son and I still lived in the same city, yet somehow our hearts drifted miles apart. This story is not about blaming anyone. It is about understanding. It is about the quiet sacrifices mothers make that no one sees. It is about the growing distances that start with a single step. And it is about the realization that sometimes, love doesn't disappear. It only changes direction. I didn't know then how deep this distance would become. I didn't know how many silent nights were waiting for me. I didn't know how many conversations would remain unsaid. All I knew was that something had changed, and I felt it deeply. And this is the beginning of how I slowly learned to let go, while still holding on with love. If you had met me a few years ago, you would have seen a very different woman. Not this quieter, softer version of myself who measures her footsteps and words with care. Back then, I used to speak freely, laugh openly, and fill my home with the sound of life. But life has a way of reshaping you. My story begins long before Saad's marriage, long before Sana entered our lives, when it was just the two of us in our small apartment. I was a single mother, but I never allowed Saad to feel the absence of anything in his life. I worked as a school administrative assistant, earning just enough to run the household and give Saad the life he deserved. Even in the hardest days, Saad was my strength. He was the kind of child who could brighten a room simply by entering it. His laughter used to echo through our home like a blessing. When he learned to walk, he held my finger tightly. When he learned to talk, he filled our evenings with endless stories. When he grew older, he became my advisor, my friend, my support. I remember the way he used to rest his head on my lap during exam nights and say, "Mom, don't worry. One day I'll take care of everything. You won't have to struggle." I never asked for that. But hearing it made me feel like my sacrifices meant something. Saad was brilliant, compassionate, responsible. Everything a parent could dream of. After his father passed, I was terrified he would grow up feeling too much sadness. But instead, he grew up with a kind of maturity that made me proud and guilty at the same time. Proud because he was strong. Guilty because he had to be. We formed a world of our own, just the two of us. A simple world but full of love. When Saad graduated and got his first job, he celebrated by taking me out for dinner. It wasn't a fancy place, but he treated me like the guest of honor. I still remember him saying, "Mom, today I want you to feel like the queen of my world." For me, that was enough. I didn't need riches. I didn't need anything grand. My son's smile, his gratitude, his kindness, that was my wealth. But life changes when children grow up. And Saad was no exception. He began getting busy with work. He started spending more evenings out, more weekends away from home. I understood, of course. He was young. He had friends. He deserved a life beyond responsibility. Then, one day, he told me there was someone he wanted me to meet. I remember preparing tea and snacks as if a special guest was coming. I didn't know what to expect, but when Sana walked into the house, I felt something soft in the air. She was polite, respectful, well-mannered. She greeted me warmly and complimented the home even though it was simple. I could see what Saad saw in her: grace, kindness, calmness. She spoke with a smile that felt sincere. My heart eased. Over the next few months, I watched their relationship deepen. Saad looked happier than ever, and Sanaa often called me auntie, in a way that felt genuine, felt hopeful. Maybe this was exactly what my son needed. When they decided to get married, Saad came to me with excited eyes. "Mom, I want you to be proud of me." And I was. Truly. Seeing him build a life felt like watching a flower I planted finally bloom. The wedding was simple but beautiful. I wore a soft green dress, the one Saad had chosen for me. He said it brought out the kindness in my face. Sanaa looked radiant, like someone stepping into a new chapter with grace. I remember holding her hands after the ceremony and saying, "Welcome, son. This is your home now too." She smiled warmly and hugged me. Everything felt perfect. After the wedding, Saad moved into a new apartment with Sanaa, just 20 minutes away from me. It was close enough to visit often but far enough for them to live independently. I thought it was ideal. The first few months were wonderful. Sanaa visited me a few times. Saad called almost every evening. They invited me for dinners on weekends. Everything felt balanced. New relationships blossomed without replacing old ones. But slowly, almost silently, that balance began to shift. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't loud. It started with tiny changes, so small that I almost ignored them. A missed phone call, a cancelled plan, a shorter conversation, a hurried goodbye. First I blamed work. Then I blamed tiredness. Then I blamed myself. Maybe I called too much, I told myself. Maybe they need space, I reassured myself. Maybe I should step back a little, I whispered quietly. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who clung too tightly. I wanted to give Saad freedom, not pressure. So I began waiting for him to call instead of calling him. Sometimes he did. Sometimes he didn't. Sanaa seemed kind whenever we met, but she began calling me auntie less often. She greeted me warmly, but with a politeness that felt distant. Respectful, yes, but distant. I wondered if I had done something wrong. Had I said something unintentionally? Had I overstepped without realizing it? Had I visited too much? Was I too present? Or not present enough? Mothers often blame themselves before blaming anyone else. One evening I cooked extra and asked Saad if I could drop it off. He told me they were going out and maybe another day. Another week I asked if I could visit. He told me they were expecting guests. Another time I called just to ask how he was doing. Sanaa picked up and said Saad was sleeping. Nothing was inappropriate. Nothing was rude. That it was all normal, all polite. But it was also all distant. Then came the day that became the quiet dividing line in my life. The day I went to see him without calling. The day he asked me, softly yet firmly, not to come unannounced. But to understand why that moment hurt so deeply, why it shook something inside me, you have to understand who we once were. You have to understand that my entire life, I had been the one person who never needed to announce my presence in Saad's world. His heart was once a home where I could walk freely. Now suddenly I needed permission. That realization didn't come all at once. Took time for me to admit it. It took many quiet evenings, many long thoughts, many nights staring at my phone, hoping it would ring. But this story, this journey, is not just about that single moment at the door. It is about all the tiny threads that began loosening long before I ever noticed. It is about the small silences, the soft withdrawals, the gentle distancing that happens not out of hatred, but out of life moving forward while something else stays behind. Children don't drift away in one day. They drift slowly, like leaves carried by water. And mothers, we stand on the shore, watching, pretending we are not afraid. But I was afraid. Afraid of losing the closeness we once had. Afraid of becoming a stranger in my son's new world. Afraid that Sanaa, unintentionally or not, saw me as someone who needed to be managed rather than included. Still I tried to understand. I reminded myself that marriages come with adjustments. That Saad and Sana were building their own routines, their own rhythms, their own home. But in the silence of my nights, when the clock ticked and the house felt too big, I also wondered, where is Saad in all this? Does he realize I'm slipping through the edges of his life? Does he feel this distance the way I do? Because love doesn't disappear. But it does change shape. And I was beginning to see that change. Slowly, painfully, but clearly. This was the setup of everything that followed. The beginning of a distance I didn't know how to bridge. The beginning of a silence I didn't know how to break. Little did I know. A much larger conflict was waiting ahead. The days after Saad asked me not to come unannounced felt different. Not dramatic, not painful in a sharp way, just different. Like the air had changed temperature without anyone noticing. I told myself it was normal. I told myself it was nothing. But mothers sense shifts even in silence. I tried to adjust, that I tried to give them space, that I tried to remind myself that this was part of life. But even when we try to convince our minds, the heart often lingers behind, quietly whispering its truth. About a week after that incident, I decided to call Saad at night. My mind had been restless all day, wondering if he was eating well, if work was treating him kindly, if he needed anything. These thoughts never stop for a mother, no matter how old the child becomes. When he picked up, his voice was gentle but distracted. "Mom, everything okay?" "Yes, son," I replied softly. "I was just thinking about you. Wanted to hear your voice." There was a short pause. Barely a second, but long enough for me to feel it. The kind of pause that tells you someone's eyes have turned toward another obligation. "Mom, can I call you back? Sana and I are in the middle of something." I smiled even though he couldn't see it. "Of course. Go ahead." He didn't call back that night. Or the next. I didn't mention it. Mothers rarely do. We swallow small disappointments like medicine we never asked for. As the weeks passed, our conversations became shorter. Not cold, not rude, just shorter, more practical, more structured, more like an obligation than a bond. "How are you, Mom?" "I'm fine, son." "Okay, good. We'll come visit sometime. Whenever you both are free." And then the call would end. I told myself this was normal. Everyone becomes busy after marriage. But deep down, I also knew that when someone truly wants to talk to you, they make time, even if it's only for a minute. And when they don't, even hours feel impossible. One evening, I decided to visit Saad again, this time after calling. I asked if I could come over. He said, "Yes, Mom, but just for a little while. We have plans later." And that sentence, "we have plans later," felt heavier than I expected. Not because they were busy, but because they were busy without me. When I arrived, Sana opened the door with a polite smile. She greeted me respectfully, but there was something different about her tone. Not unkind, just distant, careful. As if every word was weighed before being spoken. "Come in, Auntie," she said, stepping aside. I noticed small things. Tiny things that perhaps meant nothing, yet somehow meant everything. Saad had redecorated the living room. Not a single item I had given him over the years was visible. Not the embroidered cushion covers, not the small wooden showpiece his father had bought, not the painting I had made. Everything had Sana's touch now. Neutral colors, elegant frames, modern furniture. Beautiful, but not ours. A strange feeling settled inside me. A feeling of being a visitor, not a mother. Of stepping into a space where I belonged once. But maybe not anymore. Saad came out of the bedroom a minute later. He smiled, hugged me, asked how I was. He looked the same. My son, my boy, my Saad. But his embrace felt quicker, lighter, as if he was already thinking of something else. We sat in the living room, and Sana brought tea. She sat across from us, watching, listening, but not truly engaging. Saad asked about my health, my routine, my work. Everything was polite, smooth, shallow. No depth. No warmth. No real curiosity. Then I noticed something. His phone kept lighting up. Messages. Notifications. Little pings of social life. Each time he glanced at the screen, then at the clock. They really did have plans. I left after half an hour even though no one asked me to. I simply sensed it. My presence was taking up space they wanted for themselves. And no mother wants to stay where she feels like a weight. As I walked out, Saad said, "Mom, next time message before coming, okay?" My heart tightened. "Of course, son," I whispered. I went home and sat at my dining table, staring at the empty chair opposite mine. The house felt quiet, unusually quiet. I didn't realize until then how much silence could hurt. Over the next few months, the distance deepened in subtle ways. Birthdays became messages instead of visits. Dinners became, "some other day, Mom." Calls became shorter, sometimes skipped altogether. Conversations became updates, not connections. And through all of this, I never blamed Sana. I never allowed myself to. She was polite whenever we met. She never raised her voice. She never said anything harsh. But there was something invisible between us. A thin layer of boundary, of caution, of territory. Perhaps she needed space. Perhaps she felt I was too involved. Perhaps she saw me not as family, but as someone who needed careful distance. Once she said casually, "Auntie, after marriage things change. You know how it is." I nodded, even though I didn't know. Not like this. Not to this extent. One afternoon, something happened that quietly broke me. I had gone to the market and found a beautiful kurta in a color Saad loved. Sky blue, his childhood favorite. I bought it, thinking he would smile the way he used to. I called him after reaching home. "Son, I bought something for you. When can I give it?" He sounded busy. "Mom, you didn't have to. I have enough clothes." "I know," I replied gently, "but I saw this and thought of you." There was a pause. Then he said something that stayed with me for weeks. "Mom, maybe stop buying things for me. We're trying to keep the apartment minimal. Sana likes it uncluttered." Minimal. Uncluttered. For the first time I felt like the things I gave, the pieces of love I offered, were becoming unwanted objects in their life. I hung up and placed the kurta on my bed. It looked beautiful but suddenly unfamiliar. I folded it quietly and kept it in my cupboard. I never mentioned it again. A few days later, Saad and Sana organized a small dinner with friends. I found out through someone else. Not because they didn't tell me, but because I was no longer part of their social world. I saw pictures online. Saad smiling, Sana looking radiant, their apartment lit beautifully. I should have been happy. And a part of me was. But another part, the part that raised him, loved him, lived with him through every storm, felt like it had been gently erased. Not intentionally. Not maliciously, just erased. One evening, Saad finally came to visit me. Had been weeks. He looked tired, distracted, as if his mind was constantly pulled in another direction. We sat at the table. I served him dinner. His childhood favorite. He ate quietly. At one point, he put his spoon down and said, "Mom, Sana feels like you expect us to visit too often. She feels pressured." My hands froze. "Pressured?" I whispered. "She just wants some space. She's trying to settle into married life." I nodded slowly. "I understand, son." He continued. "She also thinks it's better if you call before visiting. Just so we can plan things." I lowered my eyes. "Of course. I will." He didn't see how those words cut deeper than anything before. He didn't see the way my heart folded inward. He didn't see the silent tear I blinked back. Because my son, my only child, was now repeating someone else's boundaries to me. Boundaries that once never existed. When he left that night, I stood at the window and watched him drive away. The road was quiet. The street lights flickered softly. And I felt something break. Not loudly, not painfully, but softly. Like a whispered goodbye from the past. From that day, I stopped calling every day, I stopped visiting unless asked, I stopped sending food unless requested, I stopped being present unless invited. Not because I was angry. Not because I felt insulted. but because I could feel the conflict rising inside the home I once belonged to, and I didn't want to make things harder for Saad. But in stepping back, I also stepped into a loneliness I had never known. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Saad became busier. Sana became quieter. And I became invisible. Not unloved. Just unseen. This was the rising conflict. Not a fight, not a confrontation, not a dramatic twist. Just a slow, painful drift. A drift that would eventually lead to the turning point. The moment when everything inside me shattered quietly. And after that moment, nothing, absolutely nothing, was the same again. I never imagined a day would come when the silence between me and my son would feel heavier than any argument. Silence. It's a strange thing. You would think words tear families apart, but sometimes it's the words not spoken that cut deeper than knives. And in the weeks that followed Saad's cold sentence, "Mom, please don't come unannounced," silence became the third member of our relationship. He stopped visiting, he stopped calling. And whenever my phone lit up, it was rarely his name. But every mother knows, no matter how calm her face looks to the world, her heart is constantly listening for her child. And mine was listening so hard it forgot how to beat normally. One chilly evening, when the winter moon was hanging low and silver, I finally reached my limit. I was sitting on the balcony with a shawl wrapped around my shoulders, sipping chai that had grown cold without my noticing. I stared at my phone like it was a door I didn't know how to knock on anymore. Should I message him? Should I wait? Should I pretend nothing is wrong so he doesn't feel burdened? A mother's heart is always fighting itself. Just then my neighbor's grandson ran across the street shouting, "Nanny! Dekho! I topped the test!" And she ran outside, grabbed him, hugged him like he was a precious treasure. I don't know why, but that scene broke me. 'Cause I remembered a little boy running the same way. "Mom! Look what I made! Mom! I got first prize! Mom! See my drawing!" And I had hugged him with the same warmth. Where did that child go? Who took him away from me? Marriage? Or the world around him? Or was I the one who held on too tightly? The loneliness rose inside me like a wave, and without thinking, I pressed Saad's contact on my phone. It rang. And rang. And rang. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I wasn't angry, but something inside me felt a kind of panic that mothers feel only when something is deeply, unexplainably wrong. That night, for the first time, I cried openly. No pillow. No pretending. No hiding. Just me, the dark room, and a heart that felt like it had finally cracked. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Sana, my daughter-in-law, called. She never called. Not of her own choice. When the phone rang and I saw her name, I froze, surprised. "Assalamu alaikum, Mom," she said, voice unusually soft. "Walaikum assalam, son. Is everything all right?" My heart instantly tightened. "Mom, can you come over tomorrow? I need to talk to you. Alone. Alone." That word carried weight. Girls rarely call mothers-in-law for alone conversations. Is Saad fine? Is something wrong? "No, but please come. I really need you." Her voice sounded tired, almost distressed. I agreed. But that night I barely slept. For the first time ever, Sana opened the door immediately, as if she had been waiting right behind it. She looked different. Not in her dressing. Not in her face. But in her spirit. She seemed worn out, fragile. Almost scared. "Come inside, Mom," she whispered, stepping aside. I walked in. The house was silent. Too silent. No TV, no kitchen sounds, no usual movement. "Where is Saad?" I asked. Sana hesitated. "He's not home." Her hands were trembling. And she wasn't meeting my eyes. I felt worry rise like smoke. "Sana, talk to me. What happened?" Her lips quivered. "Mom, please sit." It's hard to say standing." I sat slowly on the sofa. Sana sat across from me, but her eyes filled with tears instantly. tears she had probably been holding in for a long time. "Mom, I've made a terrible mistake." I felt my heart jolt. "What mistake, son?" She took a long breath. "Mom, when we got married I loved Saad a lot. I still do. But I didn't realize how deeply attached he was to you. How much your home, your presence, your habits shaped his identity." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. And instead of understanding it, I tried to compete with it. Her voice cracked. "I wanted him to choose me more often. I wanted him to prioritize our home, our life, our schedule. I began seeing your visits as interference." My stomach twisted with sadness, but I didn't interrupt. She continued. "I know Saad listens to me. I know my sadness affects him instantly. And I used that. I manipulated situations. I made him uncomfortable about how often he visited you. I made him feel guilty." A tear rolled down her cheek. "And that day, when you came unexpectedly, I told him I felt suffocated. I told him he wasn't protecting our privacy. I said things I shouldn't have said." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And he repeated those words to you." Suddenly, everything made sense. Every cold moment. Every distant reply. Every change in Saad's tone. Not because he didn't love me, but because he was drowning under two loves. He had simply chosen the one crying in front of him. I swallowed, holding my emotions tightly. "Sana, why are you telling me this now?" She looked up, eyes swollen. "Because Saad has changed. And I didn't want this change. I wanted attention. Not a broken mother-son bond." Her voice shook harder. "He has stopped laughing. He stays quiet. He barely talks. He doesn't sleep properly. And last night he cried. I have never seen him cry like that." My breath caught. He said, "I feel like I'm losing my mother. I feel like I hurt her. I feel like I'm failing both of you." A tear slipped down my face despite trying to stay composed. "And then," Sana continued, voice trembling, "he said something that shattered me." I waited. He said, "Maybe I shouldn't have gotten married this soon." I gasped softly. Sana covered her face with her hands. "Mom, I never wanted to become the reason he regretted his life choices. I got so lost in wanting his attention that I didn't realize I was pushing him away from the person who raised him." Her words poured out like water released from a dam. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't understand motherhood. I didn't understand the bond you two had. I just thought marriage meant he should prioritize me entirely." I reached forward, placing my hand on hers. "Son, understanding comes with time." She shook her head hard. "No, Mom. Time is not always enough. Sometimes guilt eats you from inside. That's why I called you. Because Saad won't tell you anything. And he won't blame me. And I know the space between you two is my doing." Her honesty, her tears, her courage. It humbled me deeply. "Mothers," I said quietly, "are not made of glass. We bend. We adjust. We absorb storms quietly. But sons don't belong to mothers or wives. Love isn't ownership. It should never have been a competition." She cried harder. "I know that now, Mom. I just don't know how to fix this." I squeezed her hand gently. "We will fix it together." Just then, as if destiny had timed it perfectly, the door opened. Saad walked in. He froze when he saw me. His eyes widened. A small gasp escaped him. And in that single moment, all the weeks of distance, all the forced formality, all the suppressed emotions, rose to the surface like a tide ready to break. His voice cracked into a whisper. "Mom!" I stood up slowly. He stood frozen at the door, fear, guilt, love, regret, all fighting inside his eyes. And then, he rushed toward me, as if all the walls he had built came crashing down. He held me tightly, tighter than he had hugged me in years. His face pressed against my shoulder, his voice shaking. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And there, in that single, heavy, trembling embrace, our entire story shifted. That was the turning point. Not because someone was right or wrong. Not because one person apologized. Not because wounds magically healed. But because three hearts finally spoke their truth without fear. And that truth, that honesty, that shared pain, it became the foundation of everything that came after. The moment my son cried in my arms again, the child I raised, the man he became, collapsed into the mother he thought he had lost. That was the moment our story changed forever. Stories don't heal in a single moment, not even moments as powerful as the one when Saad collapsed in my arms, sobbing like the little boy who used to cling to me after scraping his knee. That moment opened the door. But walking through it, rebuilding our bond, filling the hollow ache inside all of us, that took something deeper. It took truth, that it took humility, it took choosing love over ego every single day. And that's how our resolution began. When Saad finally pulled away from my embrace, his face was wet with tears. He looked ashamed, broken, but also relieved. As if he had been holding his breath for weeks, maybe months, and could finally exhale. "Mom, I thought you were angry with me," he whispered. I cupped his face in my hands. "Anger?" I smiled softly. A mother's heart doesn't have space for anger. Only hurt and endless love. He lowered his gaze. "I felt trapped," he admitted. "I kept thinking, if I choose you, I hurt Sana. If I choose Sana, I hurt you. I didn't know how to balance anything. And so you chose silence," I said gently. Healing is a gentle thing. It doesn't rush. It doesn't arrive with loud footsteps or sudden surprises. It comes quietly, like warm sunlight creeping into a cold room. You don't notice it at first, but slowly, it wraps itself around you until the cold feels like a distant memory. That's how the days after our reconciliation felt. Warm, slow, unfamiliar, but comforting in a way I hadn't felt in months. The morning after Saad cried in my arms, I woke up with a lightness in my chest. Not complete peace. No, that takes time, but a softness, a feeling that something which was tightly knotted inside me had loosened. I made tea for myself and sat in the courtyard. And for the first time in a long time, I found myself smiling without forcing it. Saad called early, around 9 a.m. "Mom, did you sleep well?" It was such a simple question. But when a question has been missing from your life for too long, its return feels like a gift. "Yes, son," I replied softly. "I slept peacefully." He hesitated before saying, "Thank you for yesterday. For letting me break." His voice was gentler, lighter. "I didn't let you break," I answered. "You just finally allowed yourself to stop being strong." He breathed out, almost in relief, that we spoke for 10 minutes. Not about problems, not about guilt, but about ordinary things. His work, my plants, a new recipe Sana wanted to try. Sometimes, normal conversations are the biggest sign of healing. 2 days later, Sana came to visit me alone. Something she had never done before. I opened the door and saw her standing there with a small box in her hands. "Mom, I made kheer," she said shyly. "I wanted you to taste it." Her voice trembled slightly, and I knew this wasn't just about kheer. This was her apology. Her way of saying she wanted to rebuild trust. I invited her in, and she sat with her hands clasped tightly together. "Mom," she began slowly, "I used to think you judged me, compared me, even disliked me." Her words hit me with a gentle ache. "Sana, son," I said, "I never disliked you. I just didn't know how to enter your world without invading it." She looked up, eyes softening. "And I didn't know how to share Saad," she whispered. There was no accusation in her tone. Only acceptance. We really talked for an hour. Not about mistakes but about feelings. I told her how I felt left out. She told me how she felt overwhelmed. I explained my loneliness. She explained her fear of inadequacy. Piece by piece, we placed our truths on the table like delicate glass, careful not to break them. By the time she left, the distance between us had shrunk. Not eliminated. No, not yet, but softened. And that is how forgiveness begins. Over the next few weeks, Saad changed in quiet ways. Not dramatic gestures. Not loud promises. Just presence. He came over after work some days just to sit with me for a few minutes. "Bah, Mom, thought I'd check on you." Sometimes he ate dinner with me. Other times he came to drink tea and left quickly so Sana wouldn't feel ignored. He was learning balance. Learning that love doesn't decrease when shared, it grows. One evening he told me, "Mom, I used to think being a good husband meant pulling away from everything else. But now I realize being a good husband means creating space, not cutting old ties." Hearing those words, I felt the ache inside me ease even further. He wasn't choosing between us anymore, he was choosing family. All of us. One Friday when I went to their home for dinner, I noticed something small but meaningful. On the console table by the entrance, framed neatly, was a picture of Saad and me from his childhood. It hadn't been there before. "Sana put it there," Saad whispered as he saw me looking at it. "She said the house should reflect all the love that made me who I am." My heart warmed in a way I didn't expect. Sometimes the biggest apologies come in the smallest frames. Healing is not about going back to how things were, that it's about learning a new way to be together, a way that fits who we are now. Sana slowly began including me in decisions, asking for my suggestions, valuing my input. "Mom, which color curtains should we buy? Mom, does this spice combination taste right? Mom, how do I take care of indoor plants?" These moments mattered to me, not because I needed to be needed, but because I needed to feel connected. Saad, on the other hand, grew more expressive. He hugged me more, he reassured me more. He didn't hide behind busyness anymore, he didn't bury his emotions under responsibilities. He let love flow naturally, not forcefully, not guiltily, but freely. Months later, during a simple afternoon tea, Sana looked at me quietly and said, "Mom, I'm sorry if I ever made you feel unwanted." And my eyes welled instantly, not because I needed the apology, but because she needed to give it. I placed my hand on hers. "Sana, we were all learning. All three of us. Marriage doesn't just change one person, it changes families." She nodded slowly, tears glistening. "And families," I added softly, "must learn to change together." It was a Saturday evening when the final shift inside my heart happened. I had gone to Saad and Sana's home for tea, nothing special, nothing planned, just an ordinary visit. But sometimes ordinary moments hold extraordinary healing. Sana had made chai with extra elaichi, just the way I liked it. Saad was cutting fruit and humming to himself, something he used to do as a child when he was happy. The house smelled of fresh dal simmering, the curtains moved gently with the breeze, and the living room glowed with warm lamps. It felt peaceful. Not the peace of silence, but the peace of belonging. I sat on the sofa, watching them move around their home with comfort and unity, and a thought came to me. This is what healing looks like. Not perfect. Not flawless. Just present, open and warm. Sana sat next to me and handed me chai. "Mom, taste it. Tell me if I finally matched your style." Smiled. "Let me check." I took a sip. It was good. Actually, it was better than good. "Perfect," I said. Her face lit up like a child who just received a gold star. Saad looked over and laughed. "That's it. Sana will now remind me for the next 10 years. Sana nudged him. "Yes, I will." Their playfulness reminded me of the early days of my own marriage. How small moments had stitched our lives then. And how small moments were stitching my bond with them now. Sometimes life doesn't need big changes. Just small, loving adjustments. A month later, it was Saad and Sana's first wedding anniversary. They invited me for dinner, not out of obligation but with genuine excitement. "Mom, you must come," Sana insisted. "We want the evening to feel complete." I got ready slowly that evening. As I put my dupatta on, I caught my reflection. I looked lighter, happier, warmer. The pain of the past was still a memory, but not a wound anymore. When I arrived, Sana welcomed me with a warm hug. "Mom, I have something for you." She handed me a small box wrapped in gold paper. Inside it was a delicate silver bracelet with a tiny charm, a heart carved with 3 letters. Saad Sana and me. My throat tightened. Sana this. She held my hand. It means we are not 3 separate people anymore, Mom. We are one family. Saad came from behind and hugged both of us together. In that single moment I realized something. Distance had not taken my son away from me. Change had not erased our bond. Marriage had not replaced a mother's place. It had only rewritten the way he loved me. Not less. Not weaker, just different. More mature, more intentional. Love doesn't disappear, it just evolves. That night, the table was set simply but beautifully. Soft candles. Clean plates. Steam rising from fresh biryani. 3 chairs. All facing each other. And for the first time since their wedding, I didn't feel like a guest. Felt like family. We ate slowly, talked openly, laughed gently. Saad shared memories from childhood. The mischief he did. Sana shared stories from her home, the things she missed. We talked about life, fears, hopes. When the dinner ended, Saad cleared the plates with Sana. They worked like a team. I watched them and felt something shift inside me. Not every mother gets along with her daughter-in-law immediately. Not every son understands how marriage changes him. Not every family navigates the transition smoothly. But ours had learned to grow together. Not through perfection, but through honesty, patience, and the willingness to forgive. After dinner, Saad sat beside me on the balcony while Sana prepared tea. He looked at the sky for a long time. Mom, he said finally, can I tell you something? Of course, son. He turned to me, eyes soft. I always thought adulthood meant creating distance. Separating life into boxes. Wife, mother, work, responsibility. But now I know that adulthood means learning how to hold everything together without letting go of the people who shaped you. I listened quietly. I never meant to hurt you, he continued. I never wanted you to feel forgotten. His voice broke slightly, but he held himself steady. I just didn't know how to blend my new life with my old one. I placed my hand on his. You learned, I said softly. And that learning is enough. He rested his head on my shoulder, just like when he was a child. I love you, Mom, he whispered. My eyes filled, but I stayed calm. Happiness doesn't need loud tears. Sometimes it sits quietly in your chest and warms you from the inside. I love you too, son, I replied. Always. That was the moment the last crack in my heart sealed shut. Not with grand gestures. Not with dramatic apologies. But with simple words spoken with mature love. The weeks that followed turned into months. And our relationship settled into a beautiful, steady rhythm. Fridays became my dinner days at their home. Sundays became their morning tea visits at mine. We spoke openly now, we respected each other's boundaries, we listened without defensiveness, we loved without fear. Sana and I became close, truly close. We cooked together, we went shopping together, we even argued playfully, not hurtfully, the way mothers and daughters do. One afternoon, she looked at me while we were sorting vegetables and said, Mom, I don't know when it happened, but you've become the comfort of this home. Those words were a blessing. And Saad became the balanced man I always hoped he would grow into. Responsible. Grounded. Attentive to his wife. Connected to his mother. Not torn between us, but standing proudly with both of us. Sometimes distance teaches you what closeness really means. One quiet evening, I sat alone on my terrace, watching the sky turn golden, and I thought about everything that had happened in the past year. The pain. The distance. The misunderstandings. The loneliness. The healing. The forgiveness. The growth. And I realized, love doesn't stay the same, it changes shape, it stretches, it adapts, it bends but does not break. Marriage didn't take my son away from me. Life simply taught us both how to love each other in new ways. I learned to let go of the little boy who once clung to my dupatta. And he learned to hold on to his mother without letting go of his wife. Sana learned that a mother-in-law is not competition. I learned that a daughter-in-law is not a replacement. We learn together. That family grows when hearts grow. And as the wind brushed against my face, I whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. For healing. For understanding. For the distance that taught us closeness. For the son who found his way back. For the daughter-in-law who opened her heart. And for the love that returned, not as it was before, but stronger, kinder, deeper. A love that understood, a love that endured, a love that stayed. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and the evening light turns golden, I sit by the window and think about how life changes without asking us for permission. Children grow up. Homes shift. Distances form in places we never imagined. But even in that quiet, I remind myself of something gentle. Something healing. Love doesn't disappear. It only changes its shape. Maybe my son no longer walks through my doorway the way he used to. Maybe he doesn't call me the way he once did. Maybe the world around him has become louder than a mother's soft voice. But still, a part of him lives inside my heart, untouched by time, untouched by distance. There are days when I still feel a little ache, the kind that comes when memories sit too close. But now, instead of pushing that ache away, I let it sit beside me. It reminds me that I once loved deeply. And I was loved deeply in return. When I close my eyes at night, I whisper a small prayer. Not for the past to return, but for the future to be kinder to all of us, for my son to find the wisdom to understand my heart, for my daughter-in-law to find space in hers, for me to keep walking with grace, even when the path is lonely. Life has its own seasons. Some are full of people. Some are full of silence, but every season teaches us something. And this one taught me that a mother's love is not measured by how close her children stand next to her, but by how gently she carries them in her heart, even when they walk far away. Maybe one day my son will look back and realize that I was never a burden, only a home. Maybe he will remember the taste of my cooking, the warmth of my hands, the quiet prayers I made for him. Maybe he will turn around even once and say, "Mom, I'm here." But until that day comes, if it ever does, I will not let bitterness touch my heart. I will not let disappointment erase years of love. I will not let loneliness turn me cold. Because I'm still his mother. And mothers, we don't stop loving. Not when children grow up. Not when they change. Not even when they walk away. We simply learn to love from a distance. Softly. Quietly. Patiently. And sometimes, that is enough to keep the heart alive.